What's up everybody, Daniel here, and this is the first video in my series, Startup Ortho Practice. I just want to make one thing perfectly clear before we get started. I'm not claiming or pretending to be an expert at starting your own practice at all. I'm just trying to document my experience so that hopefully you'll be able to learn from my successes and my failures along the way. So before we jump into it, I just want to briefly touch on my experience with practice management and opening up an office from my education. So we'll go all the way back to 4th year of dental school at McGill. We had a practice management course, which kind of opened my mind up to these ideas, some of the things that I'm going through now. I also had a 2nd and 3rd year practice management course in my orthodontics residency, which was again really helpful just to kind of give you an idea the type of people you're going to be working with, such as the banker, accountant, lawyers, architects. And then we also kind of talked about leasing a place versus buying, the different types of opportunities after school. During my orthodontics residency, I also had the chance to attend the SCORE event, which was the symposium for Canadian orthodontic residents. And this was a whole day focused on the business side of orthodontics. And some of that was also opening up an orthodontic practice. So I found that to be really helpful. I also did an online course. It's called Mastering the Business of Orthodontics. It's put on by the AAO and Wharton. And again, this was really helpful, not so much because they talked about how to build an office, but they talked about the systems in place, how to be efficient, how to be a good leader. And I think it's really important to have these things in mind when you are designing and building a practice, because you want to create a space that allows you to be efficient, allows you to be a good leader and work well with your team, give the patients a good experience in your office. So those were the main things that I've done in the past that I think helped to prepare me for this journey. Not a lot, but better than nothing. That brings us to day 0, December 1st, 2023, when I decided, okay, I definitely want to open up a practice. I need to get going. I knew it was going to be a challenging task. I know there's going to be growing pains along the way, but it's something that I'm really passionate about. It's something that I really want to do. And I'm just excited to get going. And I'm excited for you guys to follow me on this journey. The first real move I made was getting in contact with a sales rep who my dad has worked closely with for many years. He was kind of my first contact point. He's someone who's well connected. He has experience helping others open up their offices. So that was the first person I talked to. We chatted on the phone and he seemed like he was committed to helping me get the ball rolling. We started talking about realistic timelines. We were thinking it would probably take around 10 to 12 months from start to finish to go through this process, from me reaching out to him to having an office built and ready to treat patients. And keep in mind, I'm in New York City right now, trying to coordinate an office build back in Canada. So it's a little bit challenging not being there in person, but I felt fortunate that this sales rep was being really helpful and responsive. And I also had my family back home to help me out when I needed things done in person or on site. The second week of December, I decided to do something which I found to be really, really helpful. I went on to the AAO website and I actually found this office design course. It's like a really short, concise course they have that goes over some of the basic steps in opening and designing an office. I would recommend that anyone who can get access to those videos, they check that out. One thing that they recommended in this video series, and I'd also heard other people say it as well, was to go on Pinterest and start to look for inspiring offices and save them so that when it comes time to discuss with an architect or an interior designer, you can show them visuals which really help to convey what you're looking for. So I did that. I made my first Pinterest account and I started searching various words and terms, trying to find offices, dental offices, as well as even some like restaurants and hotel lobbies that kind of had the feel that I think I'd like to create for my own practice. Another thing I started to do was look online for dental architecture companies. There are some popular ones out there, and you can just search, see some of the offices that they've built in the past, and sometimes you can even find the floor plan for these offices. So it helps you again to think about how you can utilize space, how much space you might need, and how you can organize the office to make sure there's an efficient flow of patients throughout the day. This also helped me get a sense of how much space I might need for an office. Initially, I was thinking 3,000 or 3,500 square feet, but when I started to see some of these office designs, keeping in mind that I'll probably have a little bit of a smaller practice at first as I'm growing, I think that somewhere around 2,500 to 3,000 square feet would be a realistic goal for me. Another thing I did during the second week of December, I started really using Google Maps to scout out my city. I was looking for busy intersections, where schools are located, where malls are located, and also where other orthodontists are located in my town, because I didn't want to be too close to anyone else. And what was really interesting is that I was able to find a pocket of the city, which is actually very close to where I grew up. And there is a lack of orthodontists there, which is great because I think there is a need for an orthodontist in that area. So it seemed like a natural fit, somewhere I might be able to put my own practice. With that in mind, I made my first contact with a commercial real estate agent who my sales rep put me in touch with. We had a quick chat on the phone. We just went over who I am, what I'm trying to accomplish, the area of town I'm looking to open up a practice, as well as how many square feet I think I might need. So the real estate agent said he would get back to me with a list of some potential spaces. During the third week, my dad and we were actually looking at the possibility of buying a space instead of leasing. We explored that, took about a week to kind of come to a decision that it wasn't the best time for us to do that right now. But I would encourage you to at least check if something is possible to buy, because there are benefits to being the owner of the building rather than just leasing. So that's something to keep in mind as well, but obviously it is a bigger expense and it's not always possible. Another thing I started to do was gather some consent forms, medical forms, intro to the office types of forms. I was looking at forms from my residency in Toronto as well as my fellowship in New York. And I was just trying to collect some forms to help me have inspiration to create my own forms for my office. So wherever you are right now, you might want to think about taking a look at the current forms that your office or your residency program uses and just kind of make some notes or maybe save a copy for your own records to help you create your own forms. During the fourth week of December, I was back home for the holidays and I had a lot of free time, so I tried to make really good use of this time. The real estate agent had gotten back to me with about 15 office locations in the area of town I was hoping for. So while I was home, I looked on Google Maps at the offices, at the intersections, and then I kind of narrowed down the list and actually drove to some of the locations just to check them out in person. Again, to see the visibility of the office, if it's a busy spot in town, the parking situation. I wasn't able to organize going into the suites during the break, unfortunately, just because it's a hectic time of year. But seeing the buildings in person really did help me narrow down my list from 15 to about 3 or 4 offices. I also spent some time working on my logo. I had a name for a practice that I've been sitting on for a couple years, and after thinking about it more deeply, I decided that I think this is the office name I want to go with, and I like to try and do some graphic design with my limited abilities, so I started working on the logo, trying to find something visually appealing, and that might be something you'd want to outsource to a graphic designer if you're not familiar with these things, but I don't think there's nothing wrong with drawing some sketches or trying to do your best, and then maybe a professional can step in later to get your final logo ready for your office. One other really neat thing I did over the break was I actually used ChatGPT to help me draft a first copy of my business plan. So I just typed into ChatGPT something like, write a business plan for a startup ortho practice. And it was quite incredible how thorough and detailed and nicely organized the response was. So I saved this and I kind of used it as my baseline. It wasn't good enough to hand to someone as my actual business plan, but it was an amazing start, and I kind of used that to focus more on certain sections or reword things how I wanted to, or you can even ask ChatGPT again to write something a little bit more specific for you. So I'd highly recommend that as a starting point for writing your first business plan. Again, lots of time on my hands over the holidays, so another thing I started to do based on my dad's recommendation was I started to think about everything that an orthodontic practice needs to have inside of it so that I could start to estimate costs. How I did this was I looked up a floor plan of an office that I thought was about the size of the office I'd like to open, and I just started writing down everything that was in each room. So for example, a reception, maybe 2 or 3 computers, the desk chairs, chairs for the patients to wait, maybe TV, video games. In the clinic, clinic chairs, braces, aligners, scanners, things like that. So I just started making a really big list of everything I might need so that when the time comes to go to the bank and ask for a loan, I can give them an estimate of how much money I need and actually show them a breakdown rather than just giving them one big number that isn't really more detailed than that. So I think that wraps up a busy December for me, a busy first month on my journey. I would say the main takeaways are that I found a sales rep who was ready to help me quarterback this whole process. I got in touch with a commercial real estate agent to start looking for office spaces, and I started thinking about a business plan, the office design, and worked on my logo. I know a little bit hectic, a little bit all over the place, but that's month number 1 in the books. I'm pretty happy with the progress that I made. I'm feeling more confident about this whole journey, and I'm excited to see what's in store for month number 2. All right, I'll see you guys soon.